I had always dreamed of a peaceful life in my small suburban home. I moved to Willow Creek, a quiet neighborhood outside of Denver, to enjoy retirement. My passion? Gardening. I poured my heart into my flower beds, spent my mornings pruning roses, and enjoyed warm evenings watching the sun set over my perfect little yard. Then the Hendersons moved in. A new family at the end of the street. At first, I didn't think much of it. Just another family looking for a fresh start, I thought. But I was dead wrong. The Hendersons had 3 boys, Ryan, Jake, and Caleb. They were young, all under 12, but built like linebackers and twice as reckless. They weren't just playful kids, they were forces of destruction. It started small. I'd see them cutting across my lawn, their sneakers kicking up the neatly arranged mulch. A crushed daisy here, a snapped tulip there. Minor annoyances. But one morning I caught them in the act. I was sipping my coffee on the porch when I saw Jake, maybe 10 years old, jump my small wooden fence like it was a hurdle and stomp right through my marigolds. He didn't even slow down. My blood boiled. I marched straight to the Henderson house, knocking firmly on the door. After a long minute, their mother, Karen, answered. She had a bored expression like I had interrupted something far more important than my silly little concerns. Hi, I live a few houses down. I just wanted to ask if you could tell your kids to stop cutting through my yard, I said, keeping my voice polite. They trampled my flowers, Karen laughed. A full condescending laugh. Oh, come on, they're just kids. It's not like they're doing it on purpose. They're destroying my garden, I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. She waved a hand dismissively. They're flowers. They'll grow back. I should have known right then that I was dealing with a special breed of entitled. But I still had hope. Maybe after I'd said something, they'd stop. They didn't. It got worse. Now they weren't just running through my yard. They were jumping over my fence multiple times a day, using my garden as their personal shortcut. One day I caught Caleb, picking up a rock and hurling it at my garden gnome, shattering it into pieces. That was it. I stormed back to the Hendersons, knocking louder this time. This time Karen's husband, Mark, answered. Your kids are destroying my yard, I said, my patience wearing thin. Mark just smirked. We've been over this. They're just having fun. Boys will be boys. They broke my gnome. They're ruining my flowers, he shrugged. Then maybe don't put breakable stuff outside. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. I knew these people weren't going to discipline their kids. So I decided I'd handle it my way. I realized the Hendersons weren't going to do anything. Their kids were tearing through my yard daily, trampling my plants like they were training for the Olympics. And their parents? They didn't care. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. First, I installed a higher fence. Not just any fence, a sturdy 6-foot-tall wooden barrier. I spent an entire weekend putting it up, sweating under the sun, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this would keep them out. I was wrong. The very next morning, I walked outside to find my brand new fence kicked to the ground. It wasn't an accident. The wooden planks were ripped apart, stomped into the mud like they were nothing. My garden? Destroyed. The flower beds I had carefully cultivated for years? Torn up. My decorative lights? Smashed to pieces. I felt something snap inside me. This wasn't just kids being kids, this was vandalism. I stormed back to the Hendersons' house and pounded on the door. When Karen answered, she looked me up and down with an amused smirk, sipping her coffee like I was just another morning inconvenience. Your kids destroyed my yard, I seethed. She raised an eyebrow. Prove it, I gestured wildly. I can literally show you the footprints in the mud. She just shrugged. Kids run around. You can't prove it was my kids. I stood there completely stunned. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. Instead, I took a deep breath, turned around and walked away. I wasn't going to waste another second trying to reason with these people. Instead, I was going to make sure their kids never set foot in my yard again. I had a friend, Mike, who owned a farm just outside of town. He used an electric fence to keep his cattle from wandering off. When I told him what was happening, he laughed and said, "Oh man, I got just the thing for you." Now, obviously, I couldn't just install an electric fence in my suburban front yard. That would be illegal. And I didn't actually want to hurt the kids. But Mike had something better, a low-voltage animal training mat. It wasn't dangerous, just a harmless static shock. Farmers use them to train dogs to stay out of flower beds. It wouldn't injure anyone, but it would definitely make them think twice before stepping into my yard again. That was step 1. Step 2, motion-activated sprinklers. Not your regular garden sprinklers. These were high-powered ones designed to keep deer away. The moment they detected movement, they'd explode. with freezing cold water, and the final touch, motion-activated speaker. I downloaded the most ungodly, demonic growl I could find, something out of a horror movie. When triggered, it would roar from the shadows like a creature straight from hell. Then, I waited. That night, it happened. Was sitting inside when I heard it, the sound of sneakers slapping against pavement, the hushed giggles of kids who thought they were getting away with something. I turned off my porch light and peeked through the blinds. The first boy, Ryan, ran straight into the yard. The moment his foot touched the training mat, "Zap!" he screamed, and jumped back so fast he tripped over his own feet. Jake, not realizing what had happened, charged forward, and that's when the sprinklers exploded to life. Whoosh! Ice-cold water blasted them from all sides. They shrieked, flailing as they tried to escape. Then came the growl, a deep, guttural, inhuman sound. It reverberated through the yard, shaking, the air like something had just crawled out of the ground. All three boys screamed like they were being murdered. They bolted, slipping in the mud, their clothes drenched, their hair standing on end from the shock. They ran so fast they almost crashed into their own front door. I nearly died laughing. But the best part? Their parents came running. Karen and Mark stormed out of their house yelling. They didn't even hesitate before charging onto my yard. Zap! Karen shrieked. Mark fell backward into the mud. They scrambled to their feet, soaking wet, faces twisted in pure confusion and fury. I stepped onto my porch, completely calm. "Oh, having some trouble?" I asked. Mark was livid. "What the hell did you do?" I crossed my arms. "I protected my property. Maybe now your kids will stop destroying it." Karen's face turned red with rage. "I'm calling the police. This is illegal." I smiled. "Sure, call them. I have security footage of your kids trespassing and destroying my yard. Let's see who gets in trouble." Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. She knew I had her. I wasn't done yet. "Your kids owe me for the damage," I continued. "Either they fix my garden or I take legal action." For the first time, Mark didn't have a smug remark. And the next morning, those little monsters were in my yard, replanting every single flower. But I knew this wasn't over. People like the Hendersons don't learn their lesson that easily. They were going to try something. I just didn't know what. Yet. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching the Henderson boys replant my flowers. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like a heartwarming moment. A bunch of kids learning responsibility, fixing the damage they caused. But I knew better. They weren't. Sorry. I could hear them muttering under their breath as they shoveled dirt and placed new flowers in the ground. Every time they thought I wasn't looking, they'd shoot me glares. I wasn't worried about them, though. I was worried about their parents. Karen stood on her porch the whole time, arms crossed, glaring at me like I was the villain in this situation. Mark wasn't outside at all. That worried me. The guy had an ego the size of Texas. There was no way he was just letting this slide. Something was coming. I just didn't know what. Yet, the first sign of trouble came the next morning. As I stepped outside to get the newspaper, I noticed trash in my yard. A crumpled fast food bag, an empty soda can, a half-eaten candy bar still in its wrapper. At first I thought maybe it had blown in from the street. I picked it up, threw it away, and didn't think much of it. Then it happened again and again and again. Every morning, new garbage, and it wasn't just random litter. It was placed, an empty ketchup packet, torn open and squeezed, onto my garden gnome. A milkshake cup dumped upside down so the sticky mess soaked into my mulch. One day I found a full bag of dog poop, tied neatly and sitting right in the middle of my walkway. I checked my security cameras, but whoever was doing it knew where they were. They stayed just out of view. I knew it was the Hendersons. I stormed, "Over there," and knocked hard. This time Mark answered. He smirked. "Can I help you?" I held up a soda can. "You want to explain why this keeps ending up in my yard?" He shrugged. "Looks like litter. Maybe the wind blew it over." I clenched my jaw. "The wind doesn't squeeze ketchup onto garden gnomes." His smirk widened. "Guess you got a real mystery on your hands then." I wanted to punch him right in the mouth, but I wasn't about to let this turn into some childish back-and-forth game. I smiled instead. "All right," I said, my voice cool. "Guess I'll just have to install more cameras." That wiped the smirk off his face. That night I installed 2 more cameras, one hidden in a tree, facing my garden, another tucked under my porch roof, aimed at my walkway. Then I waited. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the camera feed, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't the kids. It was Mark, a full-grown 40-something-year-old man, creeping through my yard like some cartoon villain. I watched in real time as he reached into a plastic bag and started dumping something into my flower beds. He moved quickly, shaking it out all over the soil. When he was done, he hurried back, crossed the street looking around like he was in some kind of spy movie. I grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. My flower bed was covered in salt. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't just trash. He was trying to kill my garden. I stood there shaking with rage. I knew what salt did to soil. It poisoned it. Nothing would grow there for months, maybe longer. And he'd done it in the dead of night like a coward. Took pictures. Then I called the police. The cops arrived within 10 minutes. I showed them the footage. They took one look at it and walked straight to the Hendersons' door. I followed. Standing back as they knocked, Mark answered, looking groggy and annoyed. One of the officers said, "Sir, we need to talk." Karen appeared behind him. "What's going on?" The officer turned to me. "You want to explain?" I stepped forward. "I have security footage of your husband sneaking into my yard and pouring salt in my garden. That's criminal damage to property." Karen's eyes widened. Mark turned red. "That's ridiculous," he snapped. The cop held up my phone, showing the paused footage, clear as day. Mark's mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing. The officer sighed. "Sir, you're under arrest for trespassing and property damage," Karen exploded. "Are you serious?" I had never been more serious in my life. They cuffed Mark right there on his porch while Karen shrieked at them. Their kid stood in the doorway, watching. Eyes huge. One of them, Ryan, actually started crying as they put his dad in the car. As they drove Mark away, he turned to me and hissed, "You'll regret this." I smiled. Guess you got a real mystery on your hands then. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't going to let this go. And I was right. I thought Mark getting arrested would be the end of it. I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen would take this as a sign to keep her head down and move on. I underestimated her pettiness. Mark was out on bail within 24 hours. I saw him standing on his porch the next evening, arms crossed, glaring at me like I was the one who had poured salt in my own garden. Karen was pacing, talking furiously on her phone. The kids? Nowhere in sight. The whole house radiated bad energy. I barely slept that night. I kept checking my cameras, locking my doors, double-checking my motion sensors. I wasn't scared. I just knew something was coming. And then, at 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the camera feed, and my stomach dropped. Flames. Someone had lit my trash can on fire. I bolted outside, grabbing the fire extinguisher from my porch. The flames were still small, licking at the edge of my driveway, but the intent was clear. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was arson. I put the fire out fast, my hands shaking as I scanned the street. No movement, no sounds, but I knew who had done it. I checked the cameras, hoping for a clear face, and then I saw it. A hooded figure creeping away from my yard, too tall to be one of the kids, too lean to be Mark. And then it hit me. Karen. I clenched my fists. She wanted war. She was going to get one. The next morning I walked straight into the police station with my phone in hand. The officer at the desk recognized me immediately. "You again," he sighed. I nodded. "Yeah, and this time it's arson." I showed them the footage. They watched carefully, then one of them frowned. "Looks like a woman," I smiled. "You get one guess who?" The officer sighed again, but this time he picked up the phone. "We'll pay them another visit." Less than an hour later, a police cruiser rolled up to the Hendersons' house. I stood on my porch and watched. Karen answered the door. Still in her bathrobe. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw the moment she realized she was caught. Her mouth opened, then shut. Her hands went to her hips. Then she started yelling. Mark came outside next, already fuming. But after a few minutes, the officers turned around and left. No handcuffs, no arrest. I frowned. I walked over to my mailbox, just happening to be outside as Karen smirked at me from across the street. "They can't prove anything," she said. I smiled back. "Guess we'll see about that." That afternoon, something strange happened. A knock at my door. I opened it and saw a teenage girl, maybe 15 or 16, shifting from foot to foot. I recognized her immediately. Olivia. She lived 2 doors down. She hesitated. I think you should see something," I frowned. "What is it?" She held up her phone. She had recorded the whole thing. Karen sneaking out in the middle of the night. Karen setting the fire. Karen running back into her house. I stared at the screen, barely able to process what I was seeing. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Olivia shrugged. "She's been awful to me, too. Her kids threw eggs at my dog last week. My mom wouldn't let me do anything about it. But I thought you might." I looked up at her. This kid had more guts than half the adults on this street. I smiled. Olivia, you just became my favorite neighbor. I didn't even wait. I forwarded the video to the police and drove straight to the station. This time, when the cops showed up at the Hendersons' house, there was no arguing, no smug smiles, no denying it. Karen was arrested on the spot. Mark exploded, yelling and swearing at the cops. He turned on me, pointing and screaming. You ruined our lives. The officers had to hold him back as they put Karen in the car, and as they drove her away, I stood on my porch and waved, but I knew Mark wasn't done, and I was right. For the next few days, he stomped around like a storm cloud, slamming car doors, muttering under his breath every time he saw me. His kids weren't in school. I imagined they were holed up inside, confused, scared, or maybe just marinating in their father's rage. The entire street had gone quiet. The neighbors knew. The cops showing up again wasn't exactly subtle. And Olivia's video? It had spread, people whispered. Some avoided eye contact, others gave me knowing nods. Silent approval. The Hendersons had made their bed, and now they were lying in it. Then, on the third night after Karen's arrest, it happened. It was late. I had just finished watering what remained of my garden, and then I heard it, a noise at the edge of my property. A shuffle. I turned. Mark, standing at the curb, just staring at me. His eyes were wild, red-rimmed, his fists clenched, then unclenched. He was a man unraveling. I didn't speak first, I just waited. You think you've won? He finally spat. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice even. Mark, go home. His breath hitched, his hands twitched. He was going to swing, could see it in his eyes, and then, Dad, stop! A voice from behind him, his son, Dad, stop! The voice cut through the thick tension like a knife. Mark turned sharply, his expression flickering between rage and something else, something closer to fear. His son, Jason, stood on the porch, barefoot, pajama-clad, his face pale under the glow of the porch light. Go inside, Mark barked. His voice was sharp, but there was an edge of something else now. Unease. Jason didn't move. I know what you did, Dad, he said. Silence. The kind of silence that hums with the weight of something irreversible. Mark's jaw tensed. Go, inside. Jason shook his head. I know, Mom told me, he said, voice trembling. She said you told her to do it. I stiffened. I hadn't seen that twist coming. Jason swallowed hard. She said it was your idea. His voice cracked. She said you told her the cops wouldn't believe him. He pointed at me. That they'd think it was just some dumb kids messing around. Mark's face drained of color. You kept saying it was his fault, Jason continued, his voice rising. But you made Mom do it. Mark took a step forward. Jason, you don't understand. She lit a fire, Dad. Jason's voice broke completely. What if it had spread? His breath hitched. What if someone had gotten hurt? Mark just stood there, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Jason was doing it for me. For the first time in this entire ordeal, I saw realization dawn in Mark's eyes. Not just anger, not just stubborn pride, but guilt. Jason took a shaky breath. Mom said she did it for us, he whispered, because you told her to. Mark exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging just slightly. Jason's voice hardened. You started this, Dad, and you lost. Another beat of silence. Then Jason turned to me. He squared his shoulders, and then, in a voice much steadier than I expected, he said, I'm sorry. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. This kid, the same kid who had trampled my flowers, thrown rocks at my gnomes, laughed in my face, was now standing up to his father. Not just standing up, calling him out. He blinked fast, like he was fighting back tears, but he didn't look away. For everything, he added. I didn't know how bad it was until Mom got taken away. He hesitated. I just thought it was funny, but it wasn't. I studied him for a long moment. He meant it. He understood. I nodded slowly. I appreciate that, Jason. Mark inhaled sharply through his nose. His hands were still clenched, but now he just looked small, like all the fight had drained out of him. He looked at Jason, then at me, then finally at his own ruined house, and without another word, he turned around. He walked inside. Jason hesitated. Then he nodded at me, just once, before following. The door shut. The porch light went out, and just like that, the war was over. I didn't see much of Mark after that. He didn't stomp around anymore, didn't mutter under his breath when he saw me, didn't even make eye contact. For weeks, the Henderson house was eerily quiet. And then, one day, a for sale appeared in their yard. They were gone by the end of summer, no dramatic farewell, no parting words, just gone. Don't know where they went. Maybe they tried to start over somewhere else. Maybe they brought their mess to another neighborhood. But something stuck with me. A few months after they left, I was outside trimming my hedges when I heard a voice. "Hey, mister." I turned. Jason. I barely recognized him at first. He looked calmer, less like a kid who had spent his whole life running from trouble, more like someone figuring things out. "You guys moved," I said, surprised. He nodded. "Yeah, new school, new house, it's better." I gave him a small smile. "Good." He hesitated, then glanced at my garden. "It looks nice," I chuckled. "Thanks. No one's been stomping through it lately." Jason shifted on his feet. "I wanted to say..." He swallowed. "I really am sorry. I should have stopped when you first told us. It wasn't funny. And I get that now." I studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Takes a big person to admit that, Jason." He kicked a rock. "I just didn't want you to think I was like them." I sighed. "You're not." His shoulders relaxed, then he grinned. "Oh, and guess what?" "What?" "My mom made my dad take gardening classes." I blinked. "You're kidding." Jason laughed. "Nope." Said if he was going to ruin someone's yard, he better know how much work it actually takes. I laughed. A real laugh. Jason smiled. "See you around, mister." And then he jogged off. After the Hendersons left, the neighborhood went back to normal. Olivia and I became unlikely friends. She'd swing by with her dog sometimes and we'd chat. People stopped cutting through my yard. Other neighbors even started planting their own flowers. And me? I sat on my porch every evening, looked at my garden and breathed easy, because some battles aren't about winning. Sometimes it's just about proving you won't be stepped on. The Hendersons were gone. For the first time in over a year, I could step outside without checking my cameras, without scanning for signs of another petty attack. The war was over, and yet even though they had left, their legacy remained. One morning, about a week after they moved, I was pulling weeds when my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, a retired school principal who lived 2 houses down, wandered over. "Looks like peace has finally returned to Willow Creek," he said with a chuckle. I smirked. "Yeah, no more trash in my yard. No more trampled flowers, no more arson attempts." He winced. "It still blows my mind that it escalated that far. People like that, they don't belong in a neighborhood like this." I nodded. Then he gave me a strange look. "So, how does it feel?" I raised an eyebrow. "How does what feel?" "You won." I thought about that for a second. Had I won? Sure, the Hendersons were gone. Sure, my yard was safe. But it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt done, like a chapter closing. Doesn't feel like winning, I admitted. Feels like finally getting to breathe again. Thompson nodded. "Well, if nothing else, you saved the neighborhood." Ever since they left, people seem more, I don't know, relaxed. He wasn't wrong. The street felt lighter. People had started chatting more, smiling more. Even the local kids, who had once used my yard as their personal jungle gym, had started playing in their own yards again. I hadn't realized how much the Hendersons had infected the neighborhood with their drama until they were gone. And then there was Olivia. A few weeks later, she stopped by with her dog, a hyperactive mutt named Buster. She leaned on my porch railing, watching as I pruned my rose bushes. "You really like gardening, huh?" she said. I chuckled. "I do." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It's kind of funny." I glanced at her. "What is?" She smirked. "That you basically defeated an entire family with flowers." I barked out a laugh. "I guess I did." "Legendary." I grinned. Then she hesitated. "Did you ever, feel bad for them?" she asked. I paused. "Did I? For Mark?" "No. He was a bully who never once took responsibility for his actions. He deserved everything that happened. For Karen? Not really. She made her own choices. But for Jason? Yeah." I let out a slow breath. "Maybe for the kid, but not his parents." She nodded like she understood. "Jason wasn't that bad. He just had..." She paused, searching for the word. "Bad role models," I finished. "Yeah." We sat in. Comfortable silence for a while, listening to the birds chirping. Then she glanced at me. "So, what's next?" I shrugged. "Just gonna keep growing my garden." She smirked. "And keeping an eye out for new villains?" I chuckled. "Something like that." She grinned. "If another psycho family moves in, I'll get the popcorn ready." I laughed. Deal. Months passed. Seasons changed, and life in the neighborhood went back to normal. But the story didn't quite end there, because one last thing happened that I'll never forget. It was nearly a year later. I had just finished planting a fresh batch of sunflowers when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there stood Jason. He was taller now, looked older, more mature. His hair was neater, his expression calmer. I stood up, brushing dirt off my hands. "Jason," he gave a small nod. "Hey, I hadn't seen or heard from him since the Hendersons moved. What brings you here?" I asked. He hesitated, kicking at the dirt. "We moved to another town. Things are better. My mom's still on probation, but my dad—" He let out a small chuckle. "He's different now." I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" Jason smirked. "He actually took those gardening classes." I stared at him. He nodded. "Yep. My mom made him. Said if he was going to destroy someone's yard, he better know how much work it takes." I laughed. A real, deep, genuine laugh. Jason smiled, then his expression turned serious. "I just wanted to say, thanks." I tilted my head. "For what?" Swallowed. "For not treating me like them." I let that sink in. Then I nodded. "You're not like them, Jason." A long pause. Then he grinned. "See you around, mister." And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in my perfectly intact garden, smiling to myself. Some battles aren't about winning. Sometimes they're just about proving that you won't be stepped on. That's the end of today's story. Did things turn out the way you thought, or were there some surprises along the way? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't joined the community yet, now's the perfect time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to catch new stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.